Hello and a very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A very good evening and very warm welcome to this very special event that we are collaborating with Banipal magazine. My name is Asir Saka and I'm the managing director of Arts Canteen here in London. I am so delightful. Hello and a very good evening. So we tonight are delightful to have distinguished guest, and figuring this particular event is a great honor to be working with Banipal, which, as we all know, it's an independent magazine that it was founded in 1998 by Margaret Obank and the Iraqi author Samuel Sham'oun. In fact, I known of Margaret for a very long time. So tonight it is our first joint venture together to bring this incredible event online. Despite all of very difficult circumstances, I'm grateful to all the team in both Banipal and Arts Canteen to join forces in putting together this event. With all respect and gratitude goes to all of our fans and followers and friends worldwide. This is a very special evening where our distinguished guests will be taking us on a journey with Velvet, the novel by Huzama, who has been publishing this novel since 2019 and won the prize for Najib Mahfouz last year, translated by, of course, Kay, who will be also one of the distinguished guests tonight. But finally, and I just wanted really to welcome everyone, and I'm grateful to all the team, and particularly Claire Roberts from Banipal and my colleague Ribal Haidar from the communications in Arts Canteen, and the production behind the scene is Aaron Silva. Plus, a special thanks goes to the publishers, the Hoopoe publishers here in the UK. And now I'm going to hand it to my friend, Mr. Paul Starsky, who's an emeritus professor of Arabic at the University of Durham, and he is also the chair of Banipal Trust for Arabic literature, and he has been contributing editor of Banipal magazine this year. Paul also is the chair of the Saif Ghobash Banipal Prize for Arabic literature translation judging panel. So, ladies and gentlemen, I will leave you in the hands of Paul. Thank you so much.
And welcome to everybody. Good evening to most people. Good morning to some people. Kay is with us from Seattle. This is a unique occasion, I think, in the history of the Translation Prize, as author and translator are literally halfway around the world from each other. And if there's anyone following the occasion from Australia, as there might be, it will, of course, already be tomorrow. We're here to celebrate Velvet, Kay Heikkinen's translation of Huzama Habayeb's novel Muhmal. But before we do so, a few words about the Banipal Trust for Arab Literature and the Saif Ghobash Banipal Prize for Arabic Literary Translation. Many of you will be familiar with Banipal magazine, which has been publishing Arabic literature in English translation since 1998, thanks to the efforts of the indefatigable Margaret Obank and Samuel Sham'oun, as well as an army of several hundred writers, translators, reviewers, and others. The Banipal Trust has been organising an annual prize for the translation of works of modern Arabic literature into English since 2006, and it is able to do this thanks to the generosity of Umar Ghobash and his family, to whom we remain extremely and eternally grateful. More recently, as some of you will also be aware, the Trust has expanded its activities to include an annual lecture, and we also have a number of other associated events, including a Writers' Fellowship at Durham University and a library and a book club. As well as serving as chair of the Banipal Trust for Arab Literature, I also happen to have been the chair of judges of this year's competition, which has proved a highly enriching as well as enjoyable experience. 14 books were submitted for the prize, of which we selected 5 for the shortlist. The books represented a rich diversity of styles, themes and settings, ranging from sprawling cities to humble villages, but common to many of them was that they revolved around the lives and dreams of ordinary people, providing intimate insights into the societies concerned, which themselves cover the full span of the Arab world, from Morocco in the west to Iraq in the east. 5 very different works, and of course there can be only one winner. However, unlike a football match, in a translation award competition, there are fortunately no losers. Making comparisons between publications in different genres or conceived on different scales is a difficult process. But after discussion, the jury agreed that the prize should be awarded to Heikkinen's translation of Huzama Habayeb's award-winning novel Velvet, originally published in Arabic in 2016 as Muhmal. The novel is a vivid story of one woman's life in a Palestinian refugee camp, told with sensitivity to the tragic world of its heroine, but above all to her disturbing and almost heroic defiance of reality. One judge described it as a triumph of the imagination over the mundane. We're delighted, therefore, that both Kay and Huzama are able to join us tonight, or in Kay's case, this morning. Huzama Habayeb is a Palestinian writer who was born and raised in Kuwait, where she started writing and publishing short stories, poetry, and journalistic pieces as a student of English language and literature. Muhmal, Velvet, is her third novel, published in 2006, and it was awarded the Naguib Mahfouz Medal for Literature in December 2017. Kay Heikkinen is a translator and academic who holds a PhD from Harvard University and is currently Ibn Rushd Lecturer of Arabic at the University of Chicago. Among other books, she has translated Naguib Mahfouz's In the Time of Love and Radwa Ashur's The Woman from Tantura. The mention of Radwa Ashur's work is perhaps particularly timely, as we are currently mourning the loss of Radwa's life partner and widower, the Palestinian poet Mourid al-Barghouthi, who died last Sunday at the age of 76. Mourid was a long-term friend of Banipal. Several of his poems were published in translation in a special issue on Palestinian literature, which Banipal published over 2002 to 2003, and he was one of the 4 authors on the first Banipal live tour, which took place the following year in 2004. He will be much missed by us all. Back to this evening. The rest of the event is divided into 3 parts. First, we will enjoy some readings from Velvet in both Arabic and English, by Huzama and Kay respectively, and I will leave them themselves to introduce the readings. After that, there will be a question and answer session. I will start off this with a few questions of my own, but there will then be a chance for members of the audience to put your questions to Kay and Huzama, and you can do this adding questions or comments on the Facebook or YouTube facilities, and your questions will then be monitored by our capable administrators behind the scenes, Claire and Ribala. Thirdly, finally, to round off the evening, we will have a little music, always a good way to end an event like this. A very special performance by Azam Ali of a Fairuz song, Heikkinen Nay, Give Me the Flute and Sing. Finally, before I hand over to Kay and Huzama, I've just been asked to encourage you to tweet about the event if you are so inclined and have not been banned from Twitter, and also to say that you can follow the prize on Facebook at facebook.com/Saif Ghobash Banipal. And so I will hand you over for readings in Arabic and English from Huzama and Kay.
Hi, good evening, everybody, and good morning, Kay. I'm so thrilled to be part of this event today and celebrating the brilliant translation of Mukhmal Velvet by the one and only Kay. What a marvelous job. Thank you so much. It was truly a labor of love, Kay. Thank you. So today we'll start reading from Mukhmal. I'll start in Arabic, and we'll start with this scene, which is very interesting one that establishes it. It does not really establish the relationship. It is already established, but it shed light at the title of the novel, Velvet, Mukhmal, the relation between one of the most beautiful characters in the novel, Sid Qamar, and her relation, the way she falls in love with Velvet, and what does it mean to her in the first place, actually. So we will start now. حدث ذلك قبل شهور. كانت يداها وعيناها تتنقل بين أقمشة ساتانية عدة في محل القماش حين غافلها بصرها ليستقر على ثوب وحيد على أحد الرفوف من المخمل الأسود. حين فض البائع ثنيات الثوب أمامها ملك النسيج ذو القوام الحريري حواسها. خوض البائع في قلب العباب الأسود أمامها. أكد لها أنه من الحرير الطبيعي وأنه لا يوجد في السوق كله نظير له. وأضاف وهو يمرر أصابعه فوق القماش المتعالية المترفعة المتأنفة أنها تخلو من أي أثر للنايلون أو البوليستر أو حتى الحرير الصناعي. ثم قال بتكبر: مش مين ما كان بيشتري مخمل. هي نفسها لم تفهم لما اشترت كل هذا البحر الأسود الشاسع الثمين، لكنها طول الطريق من السوق إلى البيت كانت تفيض فرحاً. ولو أن حياتها كانت غير الحياة التي تعرفها هي، لاعتقدت قمر أن هيئتها المتخيلة التي رسمتها ليست مهداة لنفسها فقط، وإنما لرجل محتمل، رجل بعينه، رجل هو الرجل. رسمت نفسها بفستان يحد تضاريس جسدها، التضاريس التي تحفظها جيداً وتعاينها في وحدتها سراً كلما اشتهت الحب. حين فضت القماشة على طاولة القص في البيت هالها كل ذاك السواد الجزل العبي. كان سواده كالكحل المترف الذي يحد العينين النجلاوين كعينيها. وحين درجت يدها فوق النسيج تكشف الأسود عن أسود حبري، فأسود فحمي، فأسود ليلي تأتلق فيه النجمات والأقمار. وحين سبحت أصابعها فيه انتشت برهافته. كان كل ما يمكن أن تحلم به، وكان كل ما يمكن أن تطلبه. لم تنم قمر تلك الليلة، عملت عليه أول الليل وفي منتصفه ثم في آخره، رسمته وقصته وخاطته وبطنته وكوته، حتى إذا جاء الصباح ارتدته مولهة. ابتلعت حلكته نور النهار، فظل في الضياء أسود كأشد ما يمكن أن يكون عليه السواد، حبريا فحميا ليليا آسرا. عاينت قمر طلتها في المرآة، فرأت نفسها جميلة شبعانة وممتلئة. كان يكفيها أن تشعر بذلك الامتلاء الداخلي كي تكون امرأة سعيدة بحق. شكرا. And now I think we all want to hear this piece read in English by Kay.
شكرا يا حبيبتي Huzama. It had happened months earlier. Her hands and eyes had been roving among a number of satiny fabrics in a fabric shop when her eye wandered, settling on a single bolt of black velvet on one of the shelves. When the salesman broke open the folds of the bolt before her, the cloth with its silken substance had taken possession of her senses. The salesman plunged his hand into the heart of the black billows before her, assuring her that it was of natural silk, and there was nothing to equal it anywhere in the market. He added, as he passed his fingers over the haughty, arrogant, imperious fabric, that it was free of any trace of nylon or polyester, or even synthetic velvet. Then he said snobbishly, "Not just anybody can buy velvet, real velvet." She herself didn't understand why she had bought this precious, broad, black seed, but all the way from the market to her house she was overflowing with joy. If her life weren't the life she well knew, Kamara would have thought that the form she had sketched in her imagination wasn't a gift to herself alone, but rather it was for some potential man, one man in particular, a man who was the man. She sketched herself in a dress that outlined the terrain of her body, terrain that she knew well, that she examined secretly when she was alone and desired love. When she unfolded the fabric on the cutting table at home, she was awed by the abundant, billowing black. The black was like luxurious coal used to outline beautiful wide eyes, like hers. As her hand rolled over the cloth, it revealed an inky black, then a black like coal, then the black of a night in which the moon and stars glistened. When her fingers swam through it, she was intoxicated by its fineness. It was everything she could dream of, everything she could ask. Kamara did not sleep that night. She worked on it at the beginning of the night and in the middle and at the end. She designed it and cut it and sewed it and lined it and steamed it until morning came and she put it on, giddy with delight. Its deep black swallowed the light of day. So even in the light, it remained as black can possibly be, like ink, like coal, like the night, enthralling. Kamara inspected her appearance in the mirror. She saw herself as beautiful, satisfied, and full. It would have been enough to feel that internal fullness for her to be a truly happy woman. Thank you. So I think now we are next going to read a story. A story that shows something of the spirit of Hawa, even when she's still very, very young. تفضلي.
Yes. Hawa, she's forced to marry Nazmi, who buys second-hand furniture. And this is a very lovely passage, painful, but very interesting because it shows the spirit of Hawa, how resilient she is. بعد أقل من شهرين من زواجها، أصابت حواء حكة شديدة أذهبت عنها النوم وجعلتها تتقلب في السرير بالساعات. تفشت في ذراعيها وساقيها مناطق احمرار هائلة، ثم غزت جسمها دمامل صغيرة، بعضها خزنت ماء وصديدا، حتى إذا بدأت تنزف من الهرش والخمش المتواصلين ذهبت بصحبة رابعة إلى الوحدة الصحية في المخيم. لم تخفي الطبيبة قرفها وهي تعاينها عن بعد بالمسطرة. كتبت لها مطهرا ومرهما واستعجلتها كي تغادر عيادتها. عندما سألتها حواء عن سبب الدمامل والحكة، أجابتها الطبيبة بقرف أكبر وهي تمسح المقعد الذي كانت حواء تجلس عليه بمحرمة ورقية غمرتها بسبيرتو. البق! قلبت حواء فرشة السرير على ظهرها فارتاعت من النمش الأسود الذي تفشى في أجزاء كثيرة منها. عاينت السرير، فحصت رأسيته المرتفعة كشاهدة قبر، والإطار والحواف والزوايا، لكنها لم تلحظ شيئا بخلاف انتشار بقع داكنة. قربت أنفها من الخشب فقبضت عليها رائحة نتونة. بكلتا ذراعيها القويتين أزاحت السرير الثقيل جانبيا وعاينت الرأسية العريضة من الخلف، فهالتها التجاويف الكثيرة في اللوح الخشبي منخور العصب. نكشت أحد التجاويف المتناثرة كغيوم سوداء دخانية بإبرة طويلة، فانقشعت الغيمة عن سرب من البق زحف بعضه خارجا. مشت بقة فوق كفها، سحقتها حواء بيدها الأخرى، فتقيأت الحشرة الميتة دما. فركت حواء خشب السرير كله بخرقة مبللة بالكاز كما أشارت عليها رابعة، فتراجع زحف البق يومين أو ثلاثة، لكنه سرعان ما استعاد نشاطه وعزيمته في نهش لحمها. أحرقت التجاويف السوداء بأعواد الثقاب بعدما سدتها بالقطن المغمور بالكاز، لكن عشرات الأعشاش من بيوض البق انتشرت في تجاويف أخرى. طلبت من نظمي أن يتخلص من السرير ويشتري آخر، لكنه رفض. إن جنيتي؟ تساءل مستنكرا زاعما بأن السرير جديد ونظيف وبأنها هي الموسوسة، ثم كشف لها ذراعيه الموشومتين بآثار ضربات أمواس قديمة، مقدما لها البينة على عدم وجود بق، وإلا لكان نهشا. ذات ليلة حين بلغ النهش والنسف في جسد حواء مستوى غير مسبوق، أيقظت نظمي فزعة. راح أموت! كانت تصرخ. رفع نظمي رأسه نحوها بغضب، ثم زم فمه وعضلات وجهه وركلها بقدمه بعنف، فطاحت على الأرض. انقلعي من هون، قال لها، واستدار إلى الجهة الأخرى ونام. ظلت حواء مقعية في مكانها إلى أن أطل الصباح من الشباك. عقلها لم يكن يفكر بشيء أو يرى شيئا سوى وجه نظمي. أعدت له فطوره بصمت وصبت له شايه دون أن تنظر في وجهه، حتى إذا غادر البيت إلى الملحمة ذهبت إلى المطبخ واستلت سكين اللحم الكبيرة وتوجهت إلى السرير. عرت الفرشة من غطائها، ثم غرست السكين في وسط قلبها فبقبق إسفنجها المصفر، ثم شطرت الفرشة إلى نصفين وألقتهما أرضا. عادت إلى المطبخ وسحبت المهدة من مخزن الكراكيب. كانت المهدة ثقيلة فشالتها بصعوبة وسارت بها محنية الظهر إلى غرفة النوم. تأملت السرير جيدا ثم استنفرت قوتها ورفعت المهدة بكلتا يديها وأنزلتها على الرأسية، فتكسرت قطعة منها وطارت في الهواء. شعرت حواء بأن ظهرها سوف يقسم من الألم، لكنها تماسكت وحشدت كل ما في قلبها من ضيم ورفعت المهدة عاليا قبل أن تنزل بها بقوة على الرأسية، فتحطمت جزئيا، ثم أتبعتها بضربة أعنف فانفصلت عن السرير. أصبحت المهدة الآن أخف وزنا وأيسر رفعا، فواصلت حواء تحطيم السرير. كسرت إطاره وكسرت الشبك الخشبي الذي كان يسند الفرشة وكسرت قوائمه. تناثر غبار الخشب في جو الغرفة كما طارت بعض المسامير في الهواء ليستقر أحدها في شعرها وينغرس آخر في جزء من باطن قدمها. نزعته بقوة دون أن تجفف الدم الذي سال منها. حين انتهت أخيرا من الإجهاز على السرير، حملت أشلاء جثته المتكومة على الأرض ونقلتها على دفعات إلى ساحة تجميع الزبالة في المخيم، ثم حملت نصفي الفرش المشطور على ظهرها وكتفيها وألقتهما فوق كومة الخشب. رشت على الكومة كازا وأشعلتها وسط تجمع العشرات من أطفال المخيم ممن استثارتهم النار ودغدغ صوت طقطقة الخشب الذائب أسماعهم، فعمدوا إلى تأجيجها أكثر بإلقاء أوراق وعيدان خشبية وغصينات في كتلة اللهب المتصاعدة. وحين تأكدت من أن النار أتت على السرير تماما، مشت حواء منتصبة الأحاسيس إلى لحام في أول السوق، اشترت منه كبدة خروف، ثم عادت إلى البيت فكنست الغرفة من رمال الخشب والمسامير، وشطفت أرضية البيت بالماء والكاس، وسخنت ماء، واستحمت، ودعكت شعرها وجسمها بالصابون النابلسية، وبعد الحمام قطعت الكبدة إلى مكعبات وقلتها مع بصلة مفرومة بزيت زيتون، وأكلتها كلها مع رغيفي خبز، ثم جلست على طراحة تنتظر نظمي. And now to you, Kay, to introduce it to our English readers.
Well, it's as Hawa said. This is a story of Hawa, as we will see very soon after her marriage, and she was married very young. Less than 2 months after her marriage, Hawa was afflicted by a severe itching that kept her from sleeping and left her tossing and turning in bed. It broke out on her arms and legs in enormous red splotches. Then little pimples invaded her body, some filled with liquid and pus. When she began to bleed from continuous scratching and scraping, she went with Rabia to the camp medical unit. The doctor did not conceal her disgust as she examined her from afar with a ruler. She wrote her a prescription for an antiseptic and a salve and hurried her out of the clinic. When Hawa asked about the reason for the pimples and the itching, the doctor answered her with even greater disgust as she wiped off the chair where Hawa had sat with a tissue dipped in alcohol. Bedbugs. Hawa turned the mattress over and was horrified by the black spots that spread over large parts of it. She inspected the bed, the high headboard that resembled a tombstone, the frame, the sides, and the corners, but she didn't see anything other than the widespread black spots. She brought her nose close to the wood and was seized by an odor of decay. With her strong arms, she pulled the heavy bed to one side and inspected the broad headboard from behind. She was appalled by the numerous hollows in the wooden board, its fiber eaten away. She used a long needle to dig into one of the hollows, which were scattered like smoky black clouds, and the cloud resolved into a swarm of bedbugs, some of which crept out. One crossed Hawa's hand. She crushed it with the other hand, and the insect disgorged blood. Hawa rubbed all of the wood of the bed with a rag soaked in kerosene, as Rabia had advised. The bedbugs retreated for 2 or 3 days, but they soon recovered their energy and resolve to bite her flesh. She burned the black hollows with matches after she blocked them with cotton dipped in kerosene, but dozens of nests of bedbug eggs were scattered in other hollows. She asked Nazmi to get rid of the bed and buy another, but he refused. "Are you crazy?" he asked in disbelief. He claimed that the bed was new and clean, and she was obsessed with a delusion. Then he bared his arms for her, marked with old razor blows, offering her proof that the bedbugs did not exist because otherwise they would bite him. One night, when the scratching and bleeding on her body reached an unprecedented level, Hawa woke up Nazmi in a panic. "I'm going to die!" she shouted. Nazmi lifted his head to her in anger, then tightened his lips and his whole face and kicked her violently, hurling her to the floor. "Out! Get out!" he yelled, then turned and went back to sleep. Hawa remained crouched in her place until morning appeared in the window. Her mind thought of nothing and saw nothing but Nazmi's face. She made his breakfast in silence and poured his tea without looking into his face. When he left the house for the butcher shop, she went to the kitchen and unsheathed a large carving knife, then headed for the bed. She stripped the mattress of the cover and planted the knife in its heart. Its yellowed foam sputtered. She split the mattress into 2 halves and threw them on the floor. Going back to the kitchen, she took the sledgehammer from the stored junk. The hammer was heavy, and she lifted it with difficulty, carrying it to the bedroom with her back bent. She considered the bed carefully. Then she summoned all her strength, raised the hammer in both hands, and brought it down on the headboard. A piece of it broke off and flew into the air. Hawat felt as if her back was going to break in two from pain, but she pulled herself together and summoned all of the injustice her heart held. Then she lifted the sledgehammer high and brought it down strongly on the headboard, and it shattered partially. She followed that with a more violent blow that separated it completely from the bed. The sledgehammer was lighter now and easier to lift, so Hawat continued smashing the bed. She broke the frame, she broke the wooden slats that supported the mattress, she broke the legs. Sawdust scattered in the air of the room, and some of the nails flew into the air as well, one of them landing in her hair and another planting itself in the sole of her foot. She pulled it out forcefully, without wiping away the blood that flowed from the wound. When at last she had given the bed the final blow, she picked up the limbs of the corpse in a pile on the floor and carried them in several trips to the camp dump. Then she loaded the two halves of the clothing mattress onto her back and shoulders and threw them on top of the pile of wood. She sprinkled the pile with kerosene and lit it, while dozens of kids from the camp gathered around. They were excited by the fire and intrigued by the rattling sound of the disintegrating wood in their ears. So they tried to enlarge the fire by throwing leaves, wooden sticks, and little branches on the rising flames. When she was sure that the fire had finished off the bed completely, Hawat walked to a butcher in the first part of the market, all her senses alert, and bought a sheep's liver from him. Then she returned to the house, swept up the sawdust and the nails, and rinsed the floor of the house with water and kerosene. She heated water and took a bath, rubbing her hair and her body with Nevelsi soap. After her bath, she cut the liver into cubes and sautéed them with minced onion and olive oil. She ate it all with 2 round pieces of pita bread. Then she sat on the floor pallet, waiting for her husband. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. What a lovely reading. This last passage, we were confused actually because there are so many choices, and we wanted the readers, and the listeners to get a broader perspective about the novel. But this one in particular shows the relationship between Sid Qamar and Fairuz. The songs of Fairuz are so infiltrated in her life and so connected to her memories, mostly sad memories, mostly. And of course, the love of Fairuz songs is bequeathed to her apprentice Hawa later on, because also Fairuz becomes part of her life, like Sid Qamar. أما فيروز فكانت تصدح طول اليوم في بيت ست قمر، لدرجة لم يعد معها صوتها ضيفا عابرا أو دخيلا. كانت ست قمر تحتفظ بحقيبة جلدية فيها عشرات الشرائط لأغنيات فيروز، كل شريط له علبة، وكل علبة تحمل صورة فيروز وأسماء الأغنيات. لم تسكت فيروز يوما عن الغناء في بيت ست قمر، وحين كانت ست قمر تضطر أحيانا إلى إيقاف المسجلة للتعاطي مع زبوناتها وكلامهن الكثير المتداخل، فإن فيروز كانت تظل عالقة في رأسها. وفي مرة تعطلت مسجلة ست قمر لأيام، فشعرت حواء بأن رأسها يكاد يهوي في فراغ كبير. قالت ذلك لست قمر فأيدتها، لكن ست قمر لم تبدو مضعضعة تماما لغياب الصوت مؤقتا، ففيروز كما قالت لحواء كانت في لحمها. لم تكن ست قمر تغني مع فيروز أو تدندن من ورائها، كانت تصغي بروحها بكل دقائق روحها، وأحيانا في الأغنيات التي تطويها غلالة شجن كانت تبدو وأنها ترتقي عذابات شاهقة أو تتدحرج بقسوة على سفح آلام متجددة. هناك أغنية أكثر من أي أغنية أخرى، يوم تطرق سمعها تترك ست قمر كل شيء لتعيش الموسيقى والكلمات التي يبدو أنها مصفاة تماما من البهجة، جامعة كل الحزن الذي يمكن تصوره. بيتي أنا بيتك وما إلي حدا، من كتر ما ناديتك وسع المدى وسع المدى وسع المدى. نطرتك عبابي وعكل الابواب، كتبت لك عذابي عشمس الغياب عشمس الغياب عشمس الغياب. تغمض ست قمر عينيها، تستحضر صورة بعيدة أو تقنص لحظة مستحيلة، ومع هبوط النغم والإيقاع في وسع المدى مع شمس الغياب تدريجيا قبل أن يعلو الصوت ثانية في مدة طويلة مقطرة ترشح منها رنة مجللة بالصدى لتلتف النغمة في النهايات. تراها تستجمع أنحاء جسدها كأنها تخشى أن ينفرط، فتضمه إلى بعضه، تزم كتفيها وترفعهما إلى أعلى وتميل رأسها، وإذ تجول رياح الصوت في بئر كيانها وتصول في قاع روحها تهتز فتتوكأ على أقرب شيء، ومع لا تهملني لا تنساني ما إلي غيرك لا تنساني، تهرق ست قمر شلالا من الدموع. To you, Kay.
Thank you, yeah, Huzama. I promise you I won't sing. That's Rahmatan. But I love this. Thank you so much. As to Fairuz, she was playing all day in Sit Qamar's house, to the point that her voice was no longer a passing guest or a stranger. Sit Qamar kept a leather case containing dozens of tapes of Fairuz's songs. Every tape in a box, each box bearing a picture of Fairuz and the names of the songs. Fairuz never stopped singing for a single day in Sit Qamar's house. And when at times Sit Qamar had to stop the tape recorder to deal with her clients and all their overlapping talk, then Fairuz remained suspended in her head. Once the tape recorder stopped working for several days, and Hawa felt as if her head were falling into a great void. She said that to Sit Qamar, who agreed with her, but Sit Qamar didn't seem completely debilitated by the temporary absence of the voice, for Fairuz, as she told Hawa, was in her flesh. Sit Qamar did not sing along with Fairuz or hum after her. She listened with her spirit, with every bit of her spirit. And sometimes, when the songs enfolded by a veil of grief, it seemed as if she were mounting towering torments or rolling roughly over low slopes of renewed pains. There was one song, more than any other, that brought Sit Qamar to leave everything as soon as she heard it, to live in the music and the words. It seemed to be purified completely of all joy, gathering all the sadness that could be conceived. My home is yours, I have no one. I've called you so much that the space has grown large, grown large, grown large. I waited for you at the door, at all the doors. I wrote my torment on the sun of absence, absence. Sit Qamar would close her eyes and call up a distant image, or hunt for an impossible moment. When the melody and the rhythm fell gradually on grown large, or sun of absence, before the voice rose again on a long, distilled note, from which filtered a ringing echo that wrapped around the melody at the ends. Then she would see Sit Qamar pull in the ends of her body, as if she were afraid it would go to pieces, gathering them in, pressing her shoulders together, raising them, and inclining her head. When the winds of the song roamed in the well of her being and assailed the depths of her spirit, she would tremble and support herself on anything within reach. With "Don't neglect me, don't forget me, I have only you, don't forget me," Sit Qamar would shed floods of tears.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. to both of you. Those wonderful passages in both languages. The singing. I mean, we hadn't bargained for the singing. And these hidden talents which come to light in sessions like these. That's absolutely great. So
Thank you
now
so much.
let's go and have a bit of a discussion, or not so much a discussion, but a question and answer. I mean, I'll begin with you, Huzama. This is such an we're used to all sorts of subjects and so forth, but this is such an unusual subject on many levels. What made you choose it? Why did you choose to write about this theme?
Okay. Well, thank you so much. And I'm sorry I did not disappoint Fairuz lovers all over the world. Anyway, well, I can say that, you know what, it's hard for an author sometimes, most of the times actually, to pinpoint the reason as to why they choose a specific subject, talking about, novel stories and poetry in particular. Of course, so many factors here, mostly unconsciously, come into play. But however, I have to say that my experience with Velvet was magical in its own way. I had already been working for months, in the structure of this novel, building the setting, collecting elements, working with the fabric research, buying tons of textiles, both like velvet and other stuff, envisaging, the alleys and the houses of the tale, creating the characters and their background stories. But something was missing, I didn't know what was it. And I was looking for this scaffolding that holds the narrative or the pivot of the tale. Then when I stopped looking for it, out of nowhere, I found it. It's a very interesting story. I remember it was late September or early October. I was in Jordan. And at that time, actually, in real life, it was also a time where I felt the need to be around my mom more often than I used to after my dad had passed away. So I was sleeping at my mom's home in Zarqa, the city of Zarqa in Jordan, in the special room kept for me with clean bed covers that smelled of heavily scented detergents, like all moms, covers and linen. And it seemed that my mother left the window crack open at night by mistake. It turned out to be a wonderful mistake, actually, a magical mistake. I remember I woke up around dawn and my whole senses were infused with a dominant smell, which had been almost extinct, in my memory. It was the smell of first rain that waters the earth, an earthly scent. It had been drizzling all night, the first rain of autumn. I cannot remember when was the last time I was swamped with this earthly smell, which aroused so many emotions inside me. It was roaring, bursting, violent, and so sensual. And I was about to get back to sleep when all of a sudden a woman stood outside there, right in front of me. She was walking under the rain, dragging herself and trying to pull her feet, which were sunk deep in the fresh mud. She was so real, so present and so beautiful. And she was made even more beautiful by the showers of rain that soaked her from head to toe. She looked at me, her eyes were teary, and she spoke to me without uttering a single word. I woke up in the morning. The woman in the mud was not there. I couldn't tell whether she was a dream or an apparition or even a real woman, of course. I looked outside the window. The rain had stopped, yet the earthly smell lingered in the air. From that moment, Hawa was born. The woman in mud became Hawa. And from that moment, love surprisingly blossomed in velvet amidst torrents of rain and hail, and in the heart of harsh, cold wind of winter. So, for me, as to why velvet, on a level, I am always fascinated with a sad love story. It is a very cathartic experience for me. On a deeper level, through velvet, it is clear, as I see it from my own perspective, that love cannot flourish or prosper in an environment crushed under severe sense of collective loss, betrayal, and defeat. It's a love story, a sad love story in the end.
Great, thank you. Kay, I mean, how did you come to the story? I mean, did you read it or were you approached by a publisher? And what was it that attracted you to translating it?
Well, actually, it was a former editor at American University of Cairo Press, Neil Hewison, who said, I think you might be interested in translating this. It's a novel that's won the Naguib Mahfouz Prize. And can I send it to you? And I said, oh, yes, please. And all I read were those first few pages before I wrote back and said, yes, in all caps. I would love to work on this because the language was so beautiful and so captivating and like nothing I'd ever read. And the first few pages are exactly the description that Huzama has just given us of the rain and the smells of the rain and what happens in it and the different kinds of rain and how it affects the earth differently. And of course, how it is in the rain. And the moment I read that, I thought, oh, if I get a chance to work on this, I would love to. Not, of course, quite realizing what I'd let myself in for in terms of the difficulty of the language and the end of the story, of course.
Yeah. So how did things develop? Did you, I mean, the relations between translators and authors vary considerably. I mean, so much. I mean, how did you work together? Did you work closely together or have a lot of contact? I mean, there's quite a lot of technical vocabulary and things going on here.
Well, it's a match made in heaven.
My memory, I may be wrong about this, but my memory is that I wanted to contact you. You might have contacted me first. I don't quite remember. But this was inspired in part because of Radwa Ashur, whom we mentioned earlier, because she had worked with me and helped me a great deal with the Tempura. And so I thought, wow, if I could possibly work with Huzama, that would be a gift. And it completely was a gift. The emails went flying back and forth.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Yes, we actually had a very interesting correspondence. I remember back at SOAS last February, maybe January. Yeah, last January at SOAS we had a workshop about translation, and I do think that sometimes we have to study this relationship between the author and the translator, the ups and downs and the challenges, and it was actually an example of collaboration which was fruitful for both of us. We both learned and we both discovered things that are so similar and we can identify with. For example, she would send me an idea or a question about remember we talked about the Morris set, this sofa set. And she discovered that she had one, at her aunt or her grandfather and my grandmother. So between, thousands of kilometers or hundreds of thousands, and still we have the same item at different homes, in different cultures, different countries. So we keep, discussing. I would ask her, she would answer me, and sometimes she would send me certain, lexicon. It's so Palestinian in its way. The Palestinian culture is infused. And also the words of Fairuz songs are woven inside the fabric of the narration. Because sometimes there are sentences that are taken from the same poetry or lexicon and rewritten or rebuilt or twisted to match, or to fit in the narration. So she had even to listen to tens of Fairuz songs also. And it was very wonderful because when she knows what we are talking about, or what I'm writing, or the song and the connotation of the song and its relation with the character, the development of the character, she would even appreciate the work more. I believe that. So thank you again. It was a labor of love, really, again.
Great. Yes, okay. We've got a questions coming from somebody who's listening and watching, asking about the photos that have been shown as we've been going through the event. We wonder whether Huzama could say a bit more about them.
Actually, because I've been working more than a year and a half about the research of this novel. So I went to Baqa camp Mukhayyab al-Baqa, and I know a great deal about the camp because friends and relatives of ours do live there and live in other camps like in Al-Wahdat, in Al-Zarqa. My father actually was first generation Palestinian refugee, and he settled with his family. He was driven out of Palestine and they had to go to Jordan, so they settled in tents in Zarqa before they were moved in to houses, you know, more like a shanty town, which was permanent afterwards. So these photos were part of my research. So just to capture the mood of the houses, the alleys, the market where Hawa goes to, and I've been into so many of these houses actually, and I lived in a house like that. So some of these photos are part of a collection I have together with the fabrics which I bought. So at my home, while I was writing, I almost built a room or a small home inside my house where you have the fabric, we have the photos, and you have the markets and some of these items, just to feel surrounded by the same ambience, the same atmosphere of the camp, and to smell the fabric. You know, the fabric has special smell, aroma. We called it aroma in the novel, actually, especially the velvet, and to touch it and to try it and to be around everything that keeps me in the mood of the narration itself.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Another question's come in for Kay. Well, this looks like a sort of student exam question, but I'll read it out anyway. Do you think there are differences between the Arabic and English literary traditions? For example, in the level of hyperbole that is acceptable? Or you could sort of maybe widen that a bit and think about, you know, what sort of problems this sort of difference causes for the translator, perhaps.
I just offhand, the idea of a difference in hyperbole doesn't resonate with me completely because I take some of the expressions as expressions. And, you know, we have them in English too. We say you could fry an egg on the sidewalk. Well, nobody's going to go out and fry an egg, but we mean it's really, really hot. So I didn't perceive that so much. What I do find sometimes when I'm working between Arabic and English, although I didn't in this novel for maybe obvious reasons, I do find that some authors in Arabic seem to use laughter to a much greater extent than we might in English. You know, someone laughed and someone else chuckled, and I run out of my vocabulary for laughter, and it doesn't always seem to me where I would write laughter in a book. As I say, this did not come up in this novel. This was not something I noticed, but that's the one place that I've consistently kind of pulled against a text that I'm working with.
Yeah. Question for Huzama. Was it a conscious decision? Well, it must have been conscious, but choosing the name Hawa in particular for your character, was that a difficult decision?
Actually, it was born with the character itself. As I told you, it's something very unconscious. Mostly writing, you know, you start with something and you have an idea, and all of a sudden things develop, and they choose different paths, you know. And after a while, if you have a mature character enough, it starts developing itself. But there was something about this character in particular when I started shaping Hawa's character. The name came later. She earned her name. So I did not start with the name. I didn't put different names. I said, okay, I'm going to maybe call her this or that, and then I will decide later. I did not put, sometimes I do that in certain stories and works, you know. I do that. Sometimes I put a name, and then I discover that this name, okay, my God, it doesn't fit. You know, after a while, it looks awkward. But for Hawa in particular, she earned her name because I had to move forward with the narration. I'm talking about her. I have I mean, I just, you know, her face was there in front of me, and her life, and even her body, her attire, her homes, her home, everything. So I can say after like a month or so of writing, I remember the name just came up, as if she told me, now I earn my name. This is my name.
Yeah, yes, I understand. Kay, I mean, did you have the same feelings about the character?
Yes, yes, exactly. That she was there from the very first moment, because you see her in the rain, and I don't know. This is someone asked me about this in an interview about the indirect speech, and it's funny. I never perceived it as indirect. I perceived what we were seeing as if we were seeing it through Hawat's eyes. So I felt as if the description of the rain was how she was seeing it and feeling it. I didn't feel a separation between the character and her surroundings. So yeah, very much so.
A question, well, I suppose it's for both of you. A question about the symbolic meanings of velvet. Velvet is the book, I think. Is it a sort of metonym of shelter and eventually freedom?
Okay. Well, Kate, I'd like to talk about it first. Yeah. How do you?
I don't know. I think I felt the character so strongly. I felt her individuality that I didn't take off into making her symbolic of something. I just felt her presence so strongly. That doesn't mean that she might not be. That doesn't mean that there are no other meanings that are there, of course. It's just that what came to me so strongly was her presence.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I have to ask you.
Yeah, okay. For me, actually, velvet as a precious material, it stands in juxtaposition to everything this life is not. You talk about a Palestinian camp, which is, you have the sense of decay, corruption, poverty, violence, and harshness, cruelty, violation of body and soul. So everything here actually is completely opposite to velvet. So it's everything that she wants, which is not there. It's maybe, I don't like to say it's symbolic of something, but velvet actually stands for everything that she wants, she loves, and she deserves. And when you talk about velvet, we have at least two velvet women here. We have Sif Qamar and Hawa, and both of them are as precious, as pure, and soft as velvet. So velvet in the end actually stands in stark opposition to the whole atmosphere and the cruelty of life for all the women actually in the novel. The velvet women, they are all women in love, and they are all passionate women. And they prove that love is legendary, even if it is short lived. And by the way, there's something about Hawa, Paul, you read the novel, because she's named after her great grandmother. So even her namesake, her great grandmother, was a woman in love. She was a woman who would carry her husband, her lover, on her shoulder, okay, and she
Yeah.
would walk to save him. So he might be half a man. He might be missing a leg, but not missing a heart. So for these women in velvet, actually, so velvet is the representation of everything they long for, they yearn for, and it gives them the sense of happiness, fulfillment, being complete, at least to look pretty. You know what?
Yeah.
It's so interesting. You cannot. I'm sorry, but I don't know whether men sometimes understand that. Sometimes, if you go to a shop and you buy something and you wear it and you feel pretty, you feel complete and full. Just because it makes you look pretty, but it's deeper than that. Yani, there are so many layers. It's very much, this novel, I think there are so many layers to it, like the layers of velvet. The more you look at it, there are so many layers in
Yes.
this novel,
Okay.
exactly like the material itself.
Right. We've got several questions come in. I'm going to have to be a bit selective here, but I'll put one to Huzama in particular, and then there's one I'm going to ask both of you, really, which is much more general question, not orientated to the novel at all. But there's a question for Huzama, which is rather an interesting one. Huzama appears to shy away from the Palestinian identities of her characters, both in this book and in other books of hers that I have read before the Queen falls asleep, which I confess I haven't read myself. Yes. Would you agree that you shy away from Palestinian identity?
No, actually, I'm a Palestinian writer, novelist. Writing, okay, for me is a one way to preserve the memory, and safeguard our daily legacy of living. Okay, it's the idea of my identity is so exhibit in this novel, and as much as they say about the previous one, which was Before the Queen Falls Asleep, I think it was the first even novel that tackles the Palestinian community in Kuwait before and after the first Gulf War, the Iraqi invasion and the first Gulf War. So nobody even, you have a community there that disappeared, that vanished, and no one approached that community. I'm not going to say better than me, but I think I was one of the first Palestinian authors. The idea of being Palestinian, actually, let me talk about this point. I know it's very phony, to walk this, to try to discuss this issue. Being a Palestinian does not mean that you have to hold your sword or your rifle. It's actually, we have a problem here is that you are being cornered inside or to discuss certain topics or to go on just to say that every single sentence or line that you are a Palestinian. What makes the Palestinian literature survive and stand in its own and legit is its literary, actually, component as a construction that can stand by itself and to present the person, the persona, not because his identity is evident, but his life is evident and expressed properly. And if you say that I don't approach the Palestinian identity, which means, the Palestinian question in my work, well, talk about Asl al-Hawa, my stories, Mukhmal, which is in a Palestinian camp, and Qabla an tanam al-Malika, before the Queen falls asleep. The life of the people inside these novels, these fabrics of writing is the outcome, the consequence of the political question. I am apolitical because we are here writing about the consequences. As I said, how would you expect love to grow in a place that is the outcome of a defeat? In a camp,
Sure.
And the issue is that people are angry because, you give us a distorted image of the camp. It's a camp, it's a refugee camp. It is not meant to hold a proper, normal life. This should not have been our life or anybody's life.
Sure.
If I
Okay.
could jump in here, if I could just jump in for a minute. I've said once or twice to people that have asked me about the novel, I said, look, it's a Palestinian novel that doesn't directly take on politics, but it's behind the entire circumstance of the novel. If it weren't for what has happened in the past, none of this would have the form that it does. And I've been particularly pleased that this novel is recognized both with the Naguib Mahfouz Prize and now this prize as literature, as something where everyone can find echoes of their own lives and their own concerns, and yet set in a very specifically Palestinian atmosphere. So that's.
I just need to, in a nutshell, can I say just one sentence, please? The problem is that, the expectations that we have long, presented the Palestinian persona, some sort of, elongated heroism that produced sort of legendary, and kind of sloganeering. So, and by doing this, we diminish the true men and women within, making them like a shadow, an idea, not a concrete flesh and blood.
Sure.
I feel it. I feel that I just want to write about the people, and those people are suffering because this suffering is the outcome of a bigger question that they might not be involved in it directly, but they are living it every single day of their lives.
Sure. Great. There's a couple of questions come in which are related to each other. Really, it's a very general question to both of you. What are you doing next? Have you got a new project? Okay. Somebody asked specifically, what does having won the prize mean to you as a translator?
Well, to me, as a person, it just meant the world. I could not believe it when I heard, and I was so unbelievably grateful. My late husband, Fairuz happened to win one of the earlier prizes, and I remember he was just over the moon. He was like a small child. He was so happy and so delighted, and I thought, wow, that's an amazing thing that one can never reach. So just personally, it's meant the world. As a translator, right now I'm finishing up teaching, so I hope to retire at the end of this year. And I've been looking for new projects, and I have some ideas, but still premature. I'm hoping that I can find just the right one, and it'll find an opportunity to be published. But that's still up for grabs.
Yeah. And Huzama, are you writing something else?
Yeah, actually, I started the research, the research process for a new novel, and I started writing it, and then I was, hit like every single person in the world with the coronavirus, and
Yes.
all of a sudden, yes, and I had to put it aside for a while. I'm back to it now, just recently, but during this time, I had to start recalling different memories from my life, from my current life, from my past, and I'm working on another, in parallel on another book that has to do with it's not like a memoir, but some sort of, recalling certain events in your life for one reason or another. I might publish it or not, it depends, But I am working on a new novel, and hopefully it's going to be, yes, different. It's a different theme altogether, different idea, different people, but still, it's. I'm engaged. I'm engaged with the characters every single day.
Yeah, that's absolutely great. Well, we didn't expect either of you to say, no, I'm not doing anything.
I can't. I can't. I'm a troublemaker. I'm a troublemaker. Trust me.
And I can promise you, once you retire, you'll not have any time to do anything. Right. Well, I think we're going to have to draw this question and answer session to an end. I mean, it's been a real pleasure having it. And you mentioned coronavirus. I mean, if it weren't for coronavirus, we wouldn't have been talking together quite like this. So,
oh my God, yes, I know. Yeah.
There are one or two advantages in what's obviously a very distressing situation for many people. So before I introduce Huzama Ali and hand over to her for the performance of Fairuz, I've just got to say a few very brief thank yous. First of all, of course, to our friends and colleagues at Arts Canteen for making this evening possible. It's obviously been a very enjoyable collaboration, and we hope to have some more in the future, I think. To Huzama Ali, we haven't heard her yet, but that's thanks in advance. The Society of Authors, we run the Translation Prize in association with the Society of Authors, and some of you that are watching will probably have seen also the YouTube clips, or actually saw the thing last week when the prize was presented. To the sponsor, the Saif Ghobash family that I mentioned at the beginning of the event, to this year's judges, of course, to the publishers. We haven't mentioned the publishers, but of course without the publishers there wouldn't be a book. So to Hoopoe Fiction, part of the AUC, American University in Cairo Press, were extremely...
also I would like also to extend my gratitude to my publisher Maher Kayali from Al Muassasa Al Arabi, because actually he took this book and he loved it, and it was his baby also.
Yeah. And Well, to Huzama and to Kay, obviously congratulations on respective publications and congratulations on the prize. And thank you for making such an enjoyable event tonight. And finally, I can't see you, but you can see us to everybody that's watching from wherever you are. There's one more piece of information, and that is it's been suggested if you want to buy copies of Velvet, suggested that the best way of doing it is to do it through a web link, which is uk.bookshop.org. So that's just a suggestion. You can obviously get the book by your normal routes, but that's if you're looking for some way of getting it, try uk.bookshop.org, and then you should be able to get it like that. And on that point, I'm going to say farewell and hand you over to Atzam Ali and to Fairuz.
Hello, everyone. What an interesting conversation. It's been such a pleasure to listen to all of you, and it's an honor for me to introduce the song, this amazing song by Fairuz, which has been part of me for decades. And I decided to record it after the Beirut blasts in 2020. As an artist, I feel that I needed to do something to pay some kind of tribute to all the innocent victims and their families. And what better way to do this than to record one of Fairuz's songs, perhaps my favorite song of hers. And it's an honor to present it here as part of this presentation. Thank you so much for this great honor. I hope everybody enjoys this live performance.
فتتبت السواد هل جلست العصر مثلي بين شفنات العينات ولا أناقيت تدلت كثريات الذهب. هل جلست العصر مثلي بين شفنات العينات ولا أناقيت تدلت كثريات الذهب. هل فرجت العشب ليلا وتلهفت الفداء. هل فرجت العشب ليلا وتلهفت الفداء زاهدا في مسيئتي ناسيا ما قد مضى. بعد أن